Hello and welcome to my multivariate presentation titled Explaining Feelings Toward Federal Conservatives in Canada, Economy and Politics by Stoney Creek. The intention of my study is to examine economic voting in Canada and whether perceptions of the economy particularly affect feelings about the federal Conservatives in light of public opinion data from the Canadian Electoral Studies 2008. Prior to an election, the voter observes the economy, judges its performance, and alters his or her vote accordingly. The dominant form of economic voting is to reward or punish the incumbent, in this case, the Canadian Federal Conservatives. I will be using hierarchical multivariate regression analysis and simple path analysis. Let's turn to the literature review. Nanston and Paldham talk about the responsibility hypothesis, that voters hold the government responsible for economic events. And economic determinants of electoral outcomes, Lewis, Beck, and Stagmeyer build on this hypothesis. Alvarez demonstrates that political issues and the economy are almost equally powerful, but quite asymmetrically for different parties. Carlson adds that the responsibility hypothesis works asymmetrically for parties with different ideologies. We'll further talk about the clientele hypothesis and saliency hypothesis. Other studies I used are electoral accountability in a federal system, and Rodden and Wibbles, evidence from 4 federations. Let's turn to my dependent variable. It's feelings about the federal Conservatives. This is defined by an individual's emotions toward the party. This dependent variable is measured from really dislike to really like on a scale of 0 to 100. For the simple regression, my independent variables are retrospective perception of the Canadian economy, perception of the impact of Liberal Party's green shift carbon tax on the Canadian economy, and individual financial situation. For the hierarchical regression, my control variable is personal income. My first hypothesis, having feelings that the economy has gotten better in the past year, is expected to be positively associated with how positively a person feels about the federal Conservatives, and this is affirmed by Nanston and Paldham, as well as Bélanger. The rationale here is that responsibility hypothesis. Voters hold the government responsible for economic events. My second hypothesis is that having feelings that the Liberal Party's green shift and carbon tax would really hurt the economy is expected to be positively associated with how positively a person feels about federal Conservatives. And this is confirmed by Nagler, Carlson, and Alvarez. My third hypothesis is that being personally financially better off than a year ago is expected to be positively associated with how positively a person feels about the federal Conservatives. Again, this is affirmed by Rodden and Wibbles, Lewis, Beck, and Stagmeyer. With respect to my control variable, my fourth hypothesis is that when controlling for a person's individual income, an interaction effect will be observed. Controlling for the effects of perception of Liberal green shift and carbon tax on the economy and personal financial situation, a 1-unit increase in retrospective perception of the Canadian economy produces a 0.2 unit increase in feelings toward the federal Conservatives. Next, all being equal, perceptions of Liberal Party's green shift and carbon tax on the economy produces a 0.2 unit increase in feelings toward the federal Conservatives. Personal financial situation produces a 0.16 unit increase in feelings toward the federal Conservatives. The comparative strength of the 3 indicators, the beta value indicates that perception of Liberal Party's green shift and carbon tax on the economy has the greatest influence on the dependent variable. Therefore, perception of the Liberal Party's green shift carbon tax on the economy has the greatest explanatory power for the variation in the dependent variable. The R-squared of the model indicates that 13% of feelings toward federal Conservatives is explained by the 3 independent variables. Yes, the results support my hypothesis. The relationship between all 3 independent variables and feelings toward federal Conservatives is significant. The significance of the overall equation is calculated using an F-score Since it is less than 0.05, the results are not likely due to a sampling error. In order to detect if there is multicollinearity, I examine the tolerance, and it is greater than 0.2, so there's no problem of multicollinearity. Looking at Model 2, the interaction term yields insignificant results, thus it is more likely the results are due to chance. I have a statistically significant variable, and that is perception of Liberal Party's green shift and carbon tax impact on the economy. There are 8.82 units increase in feelings toward federal conservatives. This finding confirms the rationale for my hypothesis. Low income was used as a reference category as it is the largest category and of interest. The R-square increases by 0.02. Looking at the B values, there is a large increase in the perceptions of the Canadian economy, views on Liberal Party's reforms, and personal finances. Views about Liberal Party's reforms is still the most influential factor. Let's look at the highlights from Model 1. Perceptions on the Canadian economy, views on Liberal Party, and personal financial situation are statistically significant and positive indicators of feelings toward federal conservatives. Views on the Liberal Party's green shift and carbon tax had the strongest comparative strength of my indicators for explaining variation in the dependent variable. I will now turn my attention to Model 2. The interaction term is not statistically significant. As a result, the original hypotheses concerning a specification model with the interaction term is not supported by the results. To conclude, my three hypotheses are confirmed, and there is no interaction effect with the model. Thank you.